and welcome to the Loudcast with me, your host, Kevin McLean. I am still here, still in my flat in Leith, still bringing you some of the very best of spoken word. Thank you so much for joining us once again, whether you are listening to us on your podcast platform of choice or whether you are checking out the video version on the YouTube channel. We really appreciate you stopping by. Whether this is your first time or whether you are coming back, we would really appreciate it if you could give us a little like and subscribe if you're watching the video version. And if you could give us a follow and a rate and review on the podcast one, it would help us out massively in getting more people seeing the Loudcast, spreading the word of spoken word. Absolutely good stuff. So please do all of that. Help us out. It means a lot. And we have an amazing show for you. So there's no reason not to do all that stuff. That is right. We have some amazing spoken word videos for you, and we are going to be joined by such a wonderful guest. It is Jo Gilbert. She is a tremendous poet, and she is based up in the sort of northeast of Scotland. She's fairly new to the scene, similar to Courtney Stoddart, who was our last guest, and she has been blowing up, doing a huge amount of stuff, both in sort of formal English writing and also in Doric, which is very cool, and we're going to be chatting to her about all of that. But we're going to kick off the show with another excellent Scot with a proper broad Scots accent. He is one of the absolute pillars of the Edinburgh spoken word scene, and it's lovely to be able to feature The Great Laughter War by Colin McGuire.
Could war ever be hilarious? Could war ever be hilarious? The Great Laughter War, a great humorous war. Could war ever be hilarious? Like a great laughter war, yeah? Everyone in a dummy suit, pretending to be furious, throwing eggs and flour, wielding potato guns, canisters of hysterical laughing gas, human cannonballs fired into bouncy castles, water bombs full of primary colours, battalions of meditators sitting on the front line breathing. Stand-up comedy troupes doing improv routines before splurging the audience with tomato hand grenades. Seriously, I'm serious. If we could recruit enough for this one honest war, the great humour world war of cathartic brouhaha, we could finally get serious about living. Less cold around the centre to break the ice of centuries between us. Where is the conga line on the way to war? Who doesn't want a fierce comedy struggle? I'm laughing at the very thought of this. To put a microphone in the confessional box and open the door and say it. To fight with furious amusements, with a light-hearted guffaw at all possible perspectives and grey areas of conflict. To knock the tops off empires like taking a bite out of an ice cream cone. To dissolve the grave chambers of deadpan governments and capital-accumulating bone-crunching machineries in water. To stand up and amass a rhythmic, audible joy. To go hunting for laughs and to find them everywhere, firing off into a relaxed world. This war will be a complete joke between us. Thank you.
Colin McGuire there, the buffest of the poets. He's a weightlifter / poet, which is rare. That is, yeah, Colin is always tremendous. Some truly surreal, like allegorical work. His stuff is always, yeah, very, very strange and very, very inspiring. One of my long-term favourites in the scene. Another long-term favourite of mine, someone we regularly mention here on the Loudcast and in everything we do, because she happens to be bloody brilliant. It's Georgia Bartlett-McNeil, and this is a poem of hers that we recorded quite a while now. It's a bit of a golden oldie, but it's still one of my absolute favourites on the channel. This is Georgia Bartlett-McNeil with Steady Hands.
My hands have never really known the definition of the word steady. My left limb is a bird on the wind more often than it is a tree branch on a still morning, which is to say, I never know where my palms or fingers or nails are going to land until they do. My left hand sambas on regardless of whether it is loaded or not. My right hand is strong enough to bear the burden of most things without complaint. A pen, a phone, a notebook, a clenched fist. This is, of course, until something with real weight is placed in its grasp. This is until it holds onto something it loves. And then it buckles, splinters until the heartwood, pale bone is all but showing. But together, these hands are strong. Synonyms exist to give the dark clouds their silver linings. My left hand is spontaneity, excitement. It is the spark that mirrors the flash in my eyes when I smile. My right hand is much more thoughtful, tender, guided, secure even in the face of ultimate and complete destruction. These hands are home. They are the hands I would hold my lover with if I had one. They're the hands I'd cradle my child with if I had one. They're the hands I'll live my life with, the hands I'll write and type with. These hands have never known the definition of the word steady, but neither has the rest of me. I am a perpetual earthquake, but you will never feel your body shake even as you lie next to me. I draped over your chest, or you cuddled into my shoulders. These hands, they're home. They're strong enough to hold you. So love me. Love me slow. Love me steady. Maybe then my hands will finally learn the beauty of stillness while still dancing.
Georgia there, being just the best. We love Georgia. She's so very good. She was part of our amazing Return to Form series, which also managed to feature our guest this week, Jo Gilbert. It's all a seamless cohesion of strands just woven together in the tapestry that is the Loudcast. But before we get to Jo, we have another amazing OG Loud poet. And this poem we actually put out, Carly was kind of keen for us to put it out because it's celebrating 95 years of The Great Gatsby. Yeah, it's the 95th anniversary, and it also signifies the move into the public domain of The Great Gatsby, which is cool. You know, it can be sort of reused and accessed in a way it couldn't before. So this is a piece recorded a couple of years ago now at a Loud Poets show in Edinburgh from the amazing Carly Brown. This is Nick Carraway to Jay Gatsby.
Everyone is a little bit in love with my cousin, Daisy Buchanan, some more than others. I've watched men follow her voice up and down, the sound leading them on through houses full of mahogany staircases and porcelain vases imported from China. She has a voice full of money. And in her eyes, you can see your reflection, like looking into two polished spoons. You told me how you sucked on her neck once, and it tasted like blue skies and salt brine from the air on Long Island and caviar, and you felt like a new man. That Tom Buchanan, you're saying to me, she doesn't love him, Nick, old sport, you'll see. She wrote me letters when I was in the army, and each one smelled like lavender perfume. Nick. You flick your tongue gently against your teeth when you say my name, Gatsby. We are standing outside of your mansion now at 3 a.m, eyes soggy from too much champagne and ears ringing with saxophone notes as you're saying, Daisy, I know she's still in love with me, like she was in Louisville, Gatsby. There are tears crystallizing at the corners of your eyes. I've never seen a man crying like that before in front of me. Gatsby, do you remember when we met? It was at one of your parties. I'd spent the whole night searching for the man who made this brightness. Mr. Gatsby, who was he? The man who covered the world in colored light bulbs and confetti, calling together the pulsing crowds of people ready to make mistakes. Mr. Gatsby, who bulk ordered green bottles of bootleg bourbon and wine and made time dance by quickly like these girls with plunging necklines and powdered knees. I look for you. Amidst all these people, the rooms of sparklers and feather boas, where was the man who invited me here? And when I finally saw you, I knew. When you took my hand in yours and said, Jay Gatsby, you understood me in exactly the way that I want to be understood. You could look beyond my not half-bad suit to the young boy from Michigan who wanted to be a writer but was recently hired to buy and sell bonds on Wall Street, and we became great friends. Took rides in your yellow car, accelerating towards New York cafes and jazz bars, the wind lifting your hair as you clutched on the gear shift, tugging and toning my name, Nick. Nick, I feel like I can trust you, and what a valuable thing to have in this world, a friend in whom you can truly confide. Now standing outside of your house, surrounded by the carnage of shattered champagne flutes and sleeping debutantes, I'm not going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to say that she doesn't love you in the way that you do. She'll never leave Tom Buchanan, his wealth, his aggression, the cycles of depression she descends into when he chooses not to come home again. But it's been 5 years, Gatsby, and you need to stop waiting. Redecorating your house in tinsel and filling it up with parties that you hope she'll come to because she doesn't love you in the way that I hope that someday you'll see that the light at the edge of her dock will always be that much further away, and maybe someday you'll stop watching it flicker on and off like her fluttering eyes. The sun is rising, Gatsby, and I really should be going. Nick, before you leave, just tell me, you do believe Daisy loves me, don't you? And I say, yes, Gatsby, of course I do.
And that was Carly Brown with Nick Carraway to Jay Gatsby. An amazing piece from an amazing performer. If you've been a long-time follower of I Am Loud or Loud Poets, you will know that we are huge fans of Carly Brown. She is a OG LP, and here to chat about her poem and all of her own amazing work and cool stuff she's doing. I'm very excited to have another big favourite of I Am Loud, the amazing Jo Gilbert. Welcome to the Loudcast, Jo. Thank you so much for coming to have a chat with us. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm very well indeed, thank you.
Good to hear. It's been ages since I've seen you, obviously, because it's been ages since we've seen anyone, really. How have you been keeping over lockdown?
I've been not bad. I've been kind of a little, bit fortunate to be involved in a few different things. Very glad that I'm not surrounded by a horde of screaming children or living with somebody I don't particularly like. So that's been really good.
Yeah, it must be a bit overwhelming for parents who are suddenly very outnumbered without escape, right? Like that's got to be intense. But yeah, it's lovely to have you in for the Loudcast and to kind of catch up and have a chat. Obviously, we sent you through the poem that Carly. We put out from Carly just the other week. What did you think of the piece? Are you a big Great Gatsby fan?
I'm not. I'm really ashamed to say I've never seen The Great Gatsby or read it. So when I saw the poem, I was like, oh no, I have to know things about the film. So I was kind of quickly looking up Wikipedia to kind of see who the main characters were.
See, I think that's quite an interesting thing, because like when I look at Carly's work, she does quite a lot of work that is either influenced by or reply to kind of literary works. She's done a kind of poem about 50 Shades to Grey, or sort of this one, or she did a reply to Twitter. Like she likes kind of structural responses, and it is always interesting to see if you don't understand the text material, do you still follow the poem? How did you find it?
I love Carly's work. I think her poem, her love letter to Texas, is probably my favourite one of hers. But I also haven't seen 50 Shades of Grey either, and she's got quite a few poems about that, and I kind of understood the context as well. So yeah, I really like the poem, and I love the way that she delivers as well. She's very professional at what she does. I don't think I've ever seen her delivering a bad poem.
No, yeah, that's the thing. Carly is always very polished in her presentation. Mm-hmm. She was one of the first people I seen when I came into the scene who was just so dynamic and like ready to be on stage. It was just, she's very impressive. I think one of the reasons we wanted to kind of use that poem, obviously we just kind of released it recently, but the reason we thought to include it while you were on the show is because I think you and Carly are kind of similar in some ways in terms of she also, like, Carly writes poems about a whole manner of subjects, but I think most people that know her work or have seen her work would like single her out as a funny poet, and I think a lot of people would see your work and be like, Jo is a funny poet. You've obviously won, you won with us, specifically like comedy slam and things like that, but you're not entirely comedic, and I think you see that in both your work, right, of trying to show different sides of the coin.
Yeah, I suppose, like, for me, I never want to get pigeonholed as one thing.
Yeah.
And, well, it's actually a lot of Carly's fault that I ended up getting into this poetry malarkey anyway.
Really?
Because she was kind of part of organising a women's poetry slam a long time ago now, I think 2016 or 2017, which seems like forever ago now. And, I'd kind of gone to one of her workshops with a poem with a bit of a poem, and she was like, no, that's nearly finished, you just need to tweak it. And I was like, really? And kind of through that workshop I ended up going to this women's poetry slam, mostly to learn, because I'd never been to a poetry slam before. I didn't know, kind of what it entailed, and I was just starting to get into writing properly, and that I won it. Which
Amazing.
is more of a surprise to me than anybody else. I think I was like, what? But yeah, so I entirely blame. I think I've still got a photograph of me and Carly at that.
That's amazing. I had no idea. That's so cool. Oh, well done, Katie, for picking Carly poems. That's really nice. But yeah, that's so cool. So was your first kind of like poetry reading then in a slam?
Not my first read. I'd been to Spikkin Weird twice, I think. So I'd been to Spikkin Weird twice, and nothing terrible happened. And so
that's an amazing description of an attendance at an event. Nothing went horribly wrong. It was fine.
But I always I just thought I didn't know what it was about. And I'm older. And I'm quite mouthy. And so I wasn't sure how my poems, would kind of go down. I've got a really evil, horrid inner saboteur that tells me the most vicious things. And that's probably why I never really started writing until I was in my 40s. Because I listened to it for a really long time. And so I worked in jobs in the arts, doing project management and organising parades and, working in theatres and all this kind of thing, around the edges of being creative, but always too scared or not as confident in my own ability to kind of take that step and actually make work myself. So kind of getting into the spoken word thing sort of really helped me with that, and really helped me with my confidence. My uni course really helped with it as well, and then I was kind of able to start going to spoken word nights, and then I meet wonderful people like Carly and yourselves who are really welcoming and encouraging, and it kind of just sort of takes off from there.
It's so nice to hear that, and it's interesting because I find that is you hear kind of that consistently. It was funny, I was speaking to Courtney Stoddart on the podcast last episode, and she was saying almost a similar thing of she was quite shy and didn't expect to be a performer or whatever, and kind of slowly incrementally found her way in, and then suddenly as soon as she was in went kind of exploded off. And you bring up Speaking Weird, which for people watching or listening, Speaking Weird is a tremendous night run in Aberdeen by Orla Shortall. It's become a real linchpin of the Aberdeen scene that is building up. And I know that was the first place I saw you, Jo. I think me and Katie came up to do a kind of feature set thing for Orla, and you were there and absolutely blew us away. We were so impressed to see all these new voices up in Aberdeen. But I didn't realise at that point you were so new. I also didn't realise you were in your 40s, Jo. That's insane.
I am. Thank you. I'll have that.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. I would never have guessed.
In numbers, in my head, I'm probably still around about 18.
Amazing. So you kind of were doing an English Lit Masters, right? You were working on that, and so you weren't initially kind of looking at poetry, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah. So like I've always written, and spending years putting my head into notebooks and stuff, but I would have never considered myself a writer. I'd maybe write a wee daft poem for somebody, for a pal, for their birthday, but I've never considered myself a writer, and so I decided to kind of go back to uni, and do a master's in creative writing, because that's what you need to be a proper writer. You need official things, certificates to prove that you're not a fakey cake maker. So that's what I decided I needed to do. And so I studied at Dundee, and the course there was brilliant because it wasn't a kind of literature degree per se. They just gave you these wee snapshots of kind of canonical writers and let you do your reading outside of class. So it wasn't like you've got to read these, 25 million thick books, which I would have been very intimidated by and probably not read, so that you could really kind of hone in and focus on the stuff that inspired you to write and that you were interested in. And I found that method of teaching, it like just opened up a tap in my head and the words came pouring out. I wanted to be some kind of nerdy science fiction fantasy writer, like Philip K. Dick or Ray Bradbury, Ursula Le Guin, Terry Pratchett, all these kind of authors that I grew up reading and kind of reading really widely in that sort of genre. And that's not what happened at all. I ended up writing a collection of Doric performance poetry.
A bit off where you started, then, Jo.
Tiny little bit away from where I intended to be. And I think part of the reason for that was that I got introduced to people like Tom Leonard and William Letford, who are kind of writing dialect, and kind of obviously Tom Leonard's work's really famous, and so is Billy Letford's. And I just thought, I was like, wait a minute, so you can write the way you speak. And that, to me, that was just a revelation, because although it was permissible for me to speak Doric, like with my mum or with my family or in a pub in various settings, the majority of places was, like I wouldn't be able to answer the phone at my work and say, "Fit like in, fit you saying we are moo," because I'd probably get the sack, and people would think that I was, taking the piss or whatever. So this kind of idea that I could write the way that I spoke was just amazing. And that was kind of what started my foray into spoken word.
That's so cool. I think that's amazing to find that the sort of institution, like the university. What university was it you were at?
I went to Dundee.
To Dundee, like to see that they're, the way that's structured around reading your own interests and stuff, and encouraging you to, push out and find things that then interest you, and like supporting that, and then finding, if you find that poetry and then are like, oh, and then you're sort of. Is it a dissertation? I'm so uneducated, Jo. I don't know what the names for anything. But your final submission is a collection of poems in Doric. Like, that must be quite cathartic, right? To be able to go, oh, and that official submission is, representative of how you actually speak.
Yeah. But it wasn't all in Doric. One of my projects was my kind of first sort of semester. I wrote a collection of poetry called Things Beginning with P.
It's a great title.
And that was entirely in Doric. Excuse me. Because I'd gone into my tutor and I had like 4 ideas of what I wanted to write. And the last one was a poetry collection. And I had because it was an idea, I was like, right, I'm not going to go in, because I thought, inner saboteur telling me all my ideas are crap. She's just going to say, no, like go back to the drawing board and come back again with better ideas. And so we sat and talked through the ideas. And when I said the 4th one, she was like, no, that's the one you need to do. Nobody else is doing that. And I was like, what? I don't know anything about poetry. I'd hardly read a poem in my life. I don't remember doing it at school either. But then I kind of started looking into spoken word, and the first kind of poem that really moved me was Neil Hilborn, OCD.
Oh, wow.
And that, and that last line where he goes, I want her back so bad, I unlock the door. I leave the lights on. And I do, like, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it just now.
I got like a chill even as you said it, Jo.
I was just like, oh, and then I thought, that's what I want to do when we're writing. You know, I want to invoke that kind of emotion or feeling in people. You know, I love the idea of still rattling around in somebody's head long after you've done your poem or they've read it, or, you know, wherever it is they've kind of heard or seen it. I think that's a really wonderful thing.
I think that's such a beautiful way to phrase it as well. That idea of like rattling around someone's head is really nice. For obviously people who are maybe watching or listening to the Loudcast, you know, might not totally understand what we're talking about when we're talking about Doric. I know we've had brief conversations on the Loudcast about, you know, sort of Scottish language and stuff. We had Robin McLeod in, who was talking about like Gaelic and stuff. So could you give a kind of like a brief explanation a bit of like what Doric is, how that's different from, you know, sort of Scots as people might know it, or Gaelic as people might think?
Yeah, sure. So kind of, I suppose it depends who you speak to, because there are a number of academic perspectives. So like, I'm not professing to be a linguistic expert, but, you know, from my experience, Doric is the sort of northeast Scotland variant of Scots. So there are a lot of words that are very common to Scots as a language, but we've kind of got our own variants on it. You know, there's a kind of classic, the 5 F's, which sounds really bad and it sounds like swearing. It's not. I mean, some of my poems usually is associated with swearing, but you know, this is not. So that's fit, fa, fan, far, fit, why. You know, and that's who, why, where, what, when, where. Yeah. And so there are things.
That's great because there's so much assonance and sound in there. You know what I mean? Like you can do a lot with that in poetry. I see why it appeals.
Yeah, and there's words that's very particular to areas of the northeast as well. Because I suppose like it's influenced by the farming and the fishing a lot of the time. So some of the fisher words will be similar to words in Shetlandic, and also the kind of there's the very sort of Scandi kind of, you know, Norwegian and Swedish and Dutch even, like the Dutch word for no is nay, and you know, nay is no. No nay, you know, it's not in Doric. So there's all these kind of similarities with other little bits of language. And you know, there's a guy and his wife who I'm pally with from the kind of festy circuit, and him and his wife knew loads of Doric words, and they're from the kind of Dumfries and Galloway, and I was like, how do you know that? And then it dawned on me when I started kind of learning a little bit more about the history of the language and stuff. It's because of the farming. So they would take, you know, the kind of beasts would travel with the farmers, and they would kind of go around different markets and things, and so the language would travel across the land with the farms, or then it would travel around the coast and over the sea with the fishermen. So I just find that really kind of fascinating how it all is connected and influenced by one another.
That is interesting when you see that sort of leap, right? That it's rather than because we think of language and accent and stuff as, you know, geographical, but actually there's a lot to do, I think, especially with Scots, and I am by no means any sort of expert. Like I had quite an interesting relationship with language and stuff just because I grew up as a theatre kid, and my family's, you know, sort of very broad Glaswegian accents and use a lot of, like, you know, Scots or slang or whatever. And I, you know, when I was young, I had that very, oh no, it all sounds terrible. And like as I've got older, I've learned to actually appreciate Scots and, like, you know, Scottish accent and stuff like that. But I think a lot of it is rooted in class and like how we feel about you know, these sort of dialects and languages and accents because of what they represent. They don't represent geography. They represent, like you said there, right? Doric is rooted then in farming, which is inherently, right, working class. You're working. So do you find that it is mostly sort of working class people that are looking to maintain Doric and stuff in the northeast? I
think there's an element of that. I think probably more the Shire, it's a bit more widely spoken regardless of fit class you are. just because there's that kind of rural thing. But I think definitely in the cities, for sure, like Aberdeen, posh folk didn't really speak. You know, if we had a Waitrose, there wouldn't probably be a lot of Doric speakers in Waitrose, but you would get plenty in ours.
Because I wonder how that then reflect. Like, do you feel that in your poetry that like, because you write in both, right? You write poetry in Doric and then poetry in, you know, more formal English. Do you get different responses to those poems?
Aye, but then I think I'm a little bit of a faker because I always say I'm like half tunes or half chuchter. So like my mom's side of the family is from Aberdeen City, and you know I would get my mum correct in the way I spoke when I was wee, and then my dad's side of the family are all chuchters, so they're kind of like Peterhead, the Broch, which is Fraserbra. You know, Ellen, and my grandma was actually from Strathspey, so she spoke Doric and Gaelic. I wish I had learned Gaelic from her, but I didn't. And, you know, so I've always had this kind of dual lapsing from one to the other, because I was born in Aberdeen, and then we moved out to the country. And so when I moved out to the country, I was regarded as posh because I spoke Aberdonian Doric, you know. And then when we moved back into the town again, like when I was like, second year at academy, I was broad chuch and had to modify the way I spoke a little bit to not get bullied. Because I was a proper chuch by the time I came back in Aberdeen.
It's so funny, right? Just when, you know, like you're saying, like you have to change that to avoid getting bullied or whatever, and you know, or me doing it to think that'll help acting and stuff. It's so bad that we associate so much of that with accent and stuff, which is such an arbitrary thing to do. It's very interesting. How did you find it then in the sort of spoken word scene? Because like you said, right, a lot of people, you were first brought in by Neil Hilborn. The first person I saw that really brought me into spoken word was Shane Koizan, and that's because, you know, sort of button poetry and these sort of big North American poets have much more exposure on you know, YouTube and things like that. People like Sarah Kay, Rudy Francisco, you know, Andrea Gibson, folk like that. So like, how did you, that plays a big influence on the scene in general. How did you find doing spoken word in Doric then? Because even when I've been at like Speaking Weird and stuff in the Northeast, it's you know, predominantly formal English that's spoken, right?
Aye. I think that was a lot to do with my tutor. My dissertation tutor was Lindsay McGregor, who used to run Platform in, is it Falkirk? And she's kind of quite widely published as well. And it was her that really encouraged me, because, you know, the course that I was on, they were really keen to push you to find your own voice and teaching you how to be a writer rather than teaching you like literature, you know. It was about how to kind of hone your own craft and find your voice. And so she was kind of really encouraging me with the Doric, because a lot of the things were just coming out in Doric naturally, like that's how I think. So a lot of the time when I'm writing, that's how it comes out. The poem decides whether it wants to be in Doric or no. But kind of like the scene and stuff, like nobody else was doing what I was doing. I mean, there are, you know, kind of whole host of wonderful writers, you know, kind of Sheena Blackhall and Sheila Templeton as well, who write quite a lot in Doric. But in terms of spoken word, there was nobody kind of doing what I was doing. So it was kind of like my thing for a little bit. And, you know, for me, there was a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for, archaicness about Doric. You know, a lot of kind of the writing is older. There were so many people making new kind of more contemporary stuff. And I just felt like spoken word was a really sort of modern vehicle for that. And poetry has always been about rebellion, you know.
Yeah.
And there was something rebellious in writing about how you're not supposed to speak, Ken. I'm gonna say it like this. You know, that kind of, yeah. I still get that little bit of a teenage rebel in me. And so there was something that I really liked and kind of revelled in writing and swearing, because there's a lot of swearing in my early poem. You know, like standing, screaming Doric square words into a microphone. I just found that really enjoyable. But like for me, it was about engaging younger people. And, you know, I know myself, coming from a working class background, how many kids will be being told that they can't write poetry and they can't do this and they can't, you know, they should just go to the bakers and get a job there, or they should just work in Asda's, or, you know, because that's what they're being encouraged to do. And these limits are being put on kids. And, you know, kind of like, I know from when I was at school, if I'd walked into my careers and said I wanted to be a writer, they would have laughed at. I mean, I wanted to take music and welding, and the woman tutted at me and said what I needed to do was take secretarial and live in the real world and get a proper woman's job. So you can imagine what I said to that.
That's unreal. Although I'd love to see what you would have done with the combination of music and welding. Yeah, that's quite exciting. There's an abstract theatre piece in the way.
And I was not allowed.
That's amazing. I think it's such a true statement though, that like, you know, when you look at Scots language and stuff, it is so, people think it's so stationary. Like I remember speaking to Robbie, and that's why like his big thing is doing, you know, like gamer streaming in Gaelic, because he's like, that's gonna engage with young people. And it was the same, you know, it's not even just language. Like when you look at poetry, I go on about it all the time. I hated poetry in high school because everything I saw it didn't reflect where I came from. It didn't reflect what I was seeing in the world. Like it was all about, you know, meadows and stuff that I was just like, I live in Livingston, mate. It's a new town. There's nothing here. Like do you see that more in spoken word, that it's more reflective, that then, you know, even though people aren't speaking Doric, they're more interested in at least seeing something that is, you know, actually reflective of the speaker?
Aye, and I think it's about diversifying storytelling as well. You know, we need as many different voices as we can, like otherwise it just becomes really stale. And, you know, the kind of poems that I love the most are, I suppose, things that I kind of connect with on an emotional level. And, you know, like when I was reading poems like, you know, Billy Letford's What Is It? You know, and it's all this kind of philosophical wisdom coming from a bunch of builders, and there's a Sparky in it and a joiner, and I was just like, yes, this is fucking it. You know, this is the kind of stuff that I want to be writing about. You know, like to me, real people. You know, I didn't identify with a lot of I had a real hatred of nature poetry when I first started. You know, fuck goes and like looks at herons every weekend, and you know, because I was like fishing my dad out of the pub kind of thing at the weekend. That was what I did. And like, I think just feeling really intimidated by it, and it was like the language and the complicatedness of it and the subject matter just screamed at me, that's no for you, that's not your world. And you know, these kind of writers like Tom Leonard, you know, the 6 o'clock news, basically saying, doesn't matter how I talk, what I say is just important is what you've got to say. I loved that, really loved that, and kind of wanted to carry that message to other people. And when I've gone in and done like workshops and stuff with kids, you can just see their faces lighting up, and there was like a wee queue of them. It was so cute. There was like primary 6 and 7, or primary 5 and 6, and then 6 and 7, and they all like, they wouldn't come up in the front and read because they were too nervous, but they would come up like after and show me the poems, and the teacher that I was working with was like, this is amazing. And their poems were lovely. Like, you know, there was one I did like this, a sense poem, you know, where you kind of write the 5 senses and then you've got to kind of write a line for each one, and I always get them to write I feel at the bottom for the last line. And then you take away that I taste, I trust, I smell, blah, 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 blah. And it becomes this nice little kind of contemporary poem. And there was one wee guy who was kind of sitting with this bunch of kids that you could tell were quite rowdy. And I thought, oh, aye, there's me. the troublemaker yapping and distracting everybody. And he wrote this amazing poem about being at the football with his dad. And it was like, the smell of Bovril, the taste of my pie at half-time, the roar of the crowd. It was so amazing. And I just thought, I want to do that. I want to kind of bring that. And I mean, he might never end up being a poet, but he's going to go live his life thinking he wrote at least one poem. I think everybody should do that.
But that's the thing, it maximises the potential, right, for people to at least find it interesting, rather than being put off from the first foot. Like, that's got to be a better idea. And like, I think when you look at, even because you've only been in the scene, like you were saying, right, like 2017 or whatever, which 3-4 years, but you're having a huge impact. And like, I see things like you hosted the Doric poetry slam, right, in Aberdeen. I think it was supported by Aberdeen Council and things like that. And putting that kind of stuff out there is got to be a great thing for both the scene there in general, but also for people speaking Doric. How did that all kind of come about and end up going?
I think I kind of started at a really fortunate time, and I'm probably going to be quite controversial saying this, but I also think it's the truth that the drop in the oil is one of the best things that has happened at Aberdeen. Maybe not financially, I'm not saying I'm glad that people lost their jobs or anything like that. What it did do was it forced people to really think about what they wanted to do. Because in the past, people would have the oil job for the money and they would do things, but like an amateur, there was quite a lot of amateur theatre companies and there were people putting on amateur musicals and all this kind of stuff. But nobody was kind of taking that leap to go and make professional work, or very few people. It was like the same usual suspects, the Arts Centre, Aberdeen Performing Arts, kind of all the sort of big hitters and cultural organisations. And so what that kind of drop did was people started up their own spoken word nights, performance nights. People decided, right, let's sell our flat, extra flat, and build a vegan burger bar down at the beach, and all of this wonderful things kind of started springing up at the same time. And it just the whole kind of thing started. So like the spoken word scene had already started growing when I just got into it, so like I kind of just piggybacked into it. Because a couple of people have gave me the label of the Queen of Spoken Word, and I hate that title because it wasn't me. I didn't start all of that. It was the Aberdeen Uni Lit Sock Nights and Orla doing Speaking Weird, and I just kind of came into it at the right time. And then you got Hysteria, and there was a women's open mic, and all of this stuff just started blossoming at the same time, and it was like wonderful to be a part of. But it was definitely not me that kind of instigated it. I just rode on the coattails of it.
Obviously, if you're watching or listening to this and you are based sort of in the northeast and stuff, looking to get into spoken word and looking where to go, we will put a bunch of links to some of the stuff Joe's just listed there down in the comments. And obviously, I'm sure Joe would point you in the right direction if you hit her up on Twitter and stuff like that. And all the links to Joe's stuff is in the description as well. So like, if you're kicking around the northeast and want to see some spoken word, or if you want to get involved, like, do go and check out these organizations. Because you're right, there did seem to be that kind of explosion all of a sudden in Aberdeen, where there was suddenly so many nights, and you could even see people coming at the Central Belt from Aberdeen to get gigs and that had been unheard of. You're not from the Central Belt, how strange. So like it's but I wouldn't be too modest there, Joe. Like, takes a whole bunch of stuff to make a scene work. You need people organising and promoting, definitely putting on these nights, but I always think for people to stay engaged, for people to see, they need to see progression. They need to see where it can take them, right? They need the example of, this doesn't just need to be a part-time hobby thing. It can be, something more than that, either like full-time or, just something you actually get paid for or whatever. Like, it can progress. You need those examples, and you act as an excellent one for Aberdeen. Like, obviously when we saw you, it was really cool to get you down for gigs, and like that, raises people's awareness to scenes outside of Edinburgh. It shows people in those scenes that they can get gigs at the sort of bigger spoken word, more established spoken word nights. So I think it's a great thing for the scene up there. And like, have you seen that growth kind of sustain? Obviously, we're in lockdown and stuff, so that's puts a hampering on everything. But was it at a good point just before then?
Yeah, I mean, we'd also started up a little bit of a collective. So some of the folk that were organising performance nights and people that were doing writing and a couple of artists had started up this writing collective. And so the kind of idea behind it was that we would like skill share with each other. Nice. Because we were all starting to learn things and, felt like we could help each other build on what, was already going on. And so the idea behind it was we met once a month for 2 hours and we would all take turn at delivering an hour workshop in whatever discipline. So Orla did a comedy one. We had a rapper called Arizona Brody. She did a rap workshop with us, which was a lot of fun. We ended up rapping about a bad Santa, which was hilarious. We had a visual artist doing a workshop with us and we made collages. And then the second half, we would bring pieces that we were working on, whether it was a comedy set or a poem or a short story or whatever it was. And we would get feedback from each other on the work. So we kind of try to keep that going. But I think kind of lockdown just took over everything. And there has been wee things. There've been a few Speaking Weirds and it's been online, and Finn Hall as well. He started up his A Blot from the Blue, which is taken off massively. And I mean, it's like super international. He's got people from Belarus and goodness knows where, like really worldwide people coming to do sets and things. So there has still been wee pockets of things going on, but I think everybody is mourning for a real mic and the stage and trying to get back to things as they were.
Well, I mean, it is nice in a way because it gives that refresh. Like if there are new people out there looking to get into those things, it means you can come back and those nights are going to be, really well attended. People are going to be chomping at the bit to go out there and share what they've been working on and stuff. So yeah, absolutely. Like it's nice to see that scene continuing to grow. Outside of the scene, Jo, you've obviously been diversifying the work you do and stuff as well. I keep seeing you pop up in loads of stuff. Like we had you in for Return to Form, and you've been getting loads of commission work. I know you were doing stuff for like Lidl, and that was all in Doric, which right, that was sort of underused Scots words, I think was the idea behind that project, right?
So they were kind of doing a sort of Scotland-wide campaign, but they wanted specific regional versions of what they were doing. So they kind of approached me and said, we're looking at this idea of Robert Ferguson's Daft Days, and that's kind of like the original name for the 12 Days of Christmas, and he wrote this poem in 17 oatcake. I can't remember the proper date, but it was 17 something, I think.
Ages ago, past.
And so it was taking this idea that they wanted to kind of reclaim this term Daft Days, and they wanted each person. So I think Miss Punnypenny Len, she did one, Stuart Patterson did one, I did one. Obviously they kind of wanted the whole kind of Doric experience. And we were very, that was the brief that we were given, but they were really cool and they're very free with what we wanted to do. And I just think because it was such a difficult time, I kind of wanted to go for something a bit more lighthearted and funny. And, so that's kind of why I went for the poem that I did. And then I did a commission for Aberdeen Performing Arts as well, who did this kind of digital advent calendar. And so I wrote a wee poem called The Bonnie Sparkly Christmas Tree and hijacked my hairdresser's studio to film in. Because I'm a Grinch, I don't do Christmas. And so I said,
me too. You might be the only person that has ever agreed with me on that, Jo.
That's
amazing.
There's not a shred of tinsel in my house and never will be. But I'm a total Grinch. I like the day and having a meal with people I love and all that kind of. I don't mind a present, But I hate Christmas. It's total Grinch. Because when I asked my hairdresser, she knew about the little thing as well, and she was just like, 2 Christmas poems. Who are you and what have you done with my friend?
That's so funny.
I know, so that's how well she knows me. It's like, yeah.
Amazing. I know as well recently you've been doing some work for the Aberdeen Gallery and Museum there, working on a micro commission. Is that still ongoing, or have you wrapped that up? Can you tell us a bit about it?
I've just finished handing it all in. So obviously filming and stuff around COVID has been a bit of a nightmare. So they won Museum of the Year last year because they had like a big massive refurb and, sort of rejigged the collection and did up the gallery and stuff. And it opened again at the end of last year. And so the micro commissions were a kind of series of commissioning different work to write various responses to the collection. And so they were kind of looking at, really diversifying, opinions on the artwork and what do you think should be there and shouldn't be there. And obviously kind of with the Doric background. And also I wanted to look at it from the perspective of a working class sort of view, because I know myself how important it is that we still have libraries and galleries that are free to attend and kind of all these places where people can go and be invited into these worlds. It's super important that they stay free. So I kind of wanted to write about that. So I've submitted 3 poems, one kind of performancey, one that talks about what the gallery is and what it means to me. One about a wee story about my nephew, because we spent quite a lot of time in there when he was a kid, kind of wheeling him around in the buggy or carrying him usually, because he's like sitting in the buggy in case he missed anything. And then the kind of my idea was, he took his girlfriend, who was a friend, who was a girl, but we were never allowed to call it a date. And he took her there, and I was saying to his mum, I was like, oh, that's so cute, because it's like, he was showing her pieces of himself that are kind of like reflected back at them in the art. And I just thought that was such a lovely idea. And it got me thinking about the pieces and, the kind of things that meant something to me. And so that's kind of this sort of stuff that I've been writing about. So there's 2 sort of poemy, more page style poems, and then one performancey one that's about the gallery and the space as a whole and how it's used and things. So yeah,
Amazing.
It was good fun.
So how are these going to be presented then? Are they going to be kind of like as text displayed in the gallery, or is it?
That's not been decided. I think they're hoping to do an exhibition. There was talk of all sorts of ideas, but I've got a text version, an audio version, and I've filmed versions of me reading the work as well. So they will become the kind of official bit is that we have to have a contract and we've got to go to the place where they store all the artwork and officially hand it over and sign this form. But after that, the poems will be part of the permanent collection, which is really, really cool. And I was trying to explain it to my brother's not really arty, and he always kind of slags me off a little bit for being a tree-hugging hippie, being all this stuff. And, he was like, so what does that mean then? And I was like, if we all are dead in 500 years because we've gassed ourselves or the place isn't burnt to a crisp, then people will be able to go into this gallery and look at my poems. And he was like, really? And I was like, aye.
Not so hippie now, is it?
Yeah, bragging a bit to my sibling, but I just thought, no way, that's so cool. And like, obviously, a couple of the poems are in Doric, which I think is amazing. So, even if the language does end up dying out, there will be a wee bit of it in that collection, which I just think is really amazing.
But then, it has much more chance of surviving, and as do any sort of minority language or sort of minority dialect or whatever, has a way bigger chance of surviving when people, like yourself, folk like Robbie McLeod and that are making that work and producing it and making it current and relevant to people who are living today. It's like the constant argument around, right, like Burns Days, the Burns Nights, like the one night a year you're guaranteed to get work, but it's like all based on the only poet they ever care about was dead 300 years ago. Like that's a problem.
I know.
So but we always have to push, and like it's encouraging to see the more Burns Nights I've done, more and more of them are pushing to include original poetry rather than just readings of the Bard and stuff, and like with yourself seeing like contemporary poetry done really well in Doric and showcased so prominently. Like that's very cool to see.
Aye, absolutely. Upgrading it, or as I used to say to my tutor, dragging it, kicking and screaming into the future.
Yeah, upgrading's a much nicer way to say that, isn't it, Joe? So when obviously when it's available to see and stuff, all the stuff with the gallery, I take it you'll be posting about that on your website and stuff. Where can people, is the website the best place to find your work?
I have a website. It's called Tales for the Doric Side. And it is woefully out of date. Like I'm my own staff. I don't have any minions, so I'm like trying to do the writing stuff in between two jobs.
It's tough.
So it's probably social media, and I'm like at Muckle Writing for everything to make it really easy for me, probably more than anybody else. But yeah, Instagram, my Facebook, and my Twitter are all Muckle Writing. So. And
that'll be the first link in the description below. You'll be able to jump over and get to Jo's Twitter and stuff. So yeah, do go and check out all of Jo's amazing work. It's so diverse, the range of stuff you're doing and working on, Jo, is very, very impressive. But obviously, we're desperate to hear some of your poetry. I've kept these lovely people waiting almost a whole hour. Would you mind rounding off the show for us with a poem?
Absolutely. So I'm going to do what is becoming most people's favourite, and so it kind of has to be a Doric one, really, I suppose. And it's sort of my love letter to the northeast. So it's called Fa We Are. It's recht fine to ging awa, but there's nothing like coming back. We answer the call of the land, whispering, "You've been awa too long. Mon hame quine, come awa maloon. The northeast is fa ye are, and we are hame. Tied together fae mountain to sea, we are the colour of autumn leaves and athing in a tween. We're rich in beauty. We're the mouth of the dawn, the length of the dee, swans nesting in the reeds. We are pink-footed geese, getting fat on spilt grain. We're the first spit to rain the salt tang of the air. We are the cry of the cormorant on our shallow coasts, the sand in our dunes. Our lungs hud the roar of the waves, and we are winter's breath, the clang of industry and energy, engines of ships coming in. We are good hull to sell. We are the call of the fish house and the shelter of the harbour in a storm. We are dreich days and the kiss of summer. We are shafts of sunlight bracken through the clouds. We're spring buds rising up, willing to grow, soft as petals and tough as granite. We are chuchters and toonsers, farmers and fishers, bobbies and roughy-toughy North Sea tigers. We're poets, dancers, filmmakers, musicians, and a manner of things. But we are mair than fit would ye. We are our fathers and mithers and family and friends. We are the city and shire and things we admire in others. We're assets and defects, doing our best. We're a just trying to scrape by, to suss out our place. We are a melting pot, a folk fae awai, where a Archie's burns. So welcome, mon in. Find yoursel a shell that fits and mak it your ain. We are the northeast, and this is our hame, your hame. We are hame.
Wow, that's a beautiful piece, Jo. That's so lovely. It's I think, yeah, when you listen to, it's something I think you can hear when someone's breaking out how they naturally speak, and I think there's always an extra quality to hearing someone speak in their own voice, right? It's like you like hearing someone sing in their own voice. I hate when you hear someone sing in like a pretend American accent because they think that's what they're supposed to do. And like I think a piece is always going to resonate, and especially when you're doing a piece like that is so about a specific place and how that place is home and the comfort and joy found in that. Like you have to do that in a voice that is true to the speaker, right? Stellar stuff. Amazing, Joe. I'm so excited to have the Loudcast Extra because we're going to get another poem from you and we're going to chat about that and how you kind of approach the whole putting poems together thing. That'll be interesting. I might distract us and just pick your brain more about how Doric works. That's quite interesting. But yes, if you want to see us chat or listen to us chat a bit more about poetry, please do jump over to the I Am Loud Patreon channel where you can get the Loudcast Extra. We really appreciate it. It helps us continue to make all the stuff we make and, have light and food and all that. So it's really nice. If you can't do that, then please just give us a wee like or subscribe on this video. Or if you're listening on a podcast platform, you could give us a wee follow. You could, give us a wee rate or review. Any of that stuff would help us out massively. We'd really appreciate it. And go and check out all of Jo Gilbert's incredible work. And hopefully you'll be able to go see her soon in person, either in the Northeast or wherever she ends up doing some awesome poetry. It'll be exciting to see. Jo, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been lovely speaking to you.
Awesome. All right. We will see you next time. Jo, say goodbye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, we'd appreciate it if you could hit the like button, if you could hit the subscribe button, and make sure to ring that bell icon so you don't miss any updates from us in the future. If you want to go that extra mile and support us a little further, we do have a Patreon channel with loads of exclusive goodies, and you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. We appreciate your help, guys, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.